MC for this evening, and on behalf of all the organizers of Relevant McGill, we would like to warmly welcome you to this evening of Relevant McGill. Woo! Relevant is a student initiative that has been taking place every year at McGill since 2016. The conference is designed to address life's biggest questions, covering topics such as faith and science, the problem of evil, and the history of the church. As we proceed with our programming, we invite you to fill out the response card that was handed to you as you entered the room. Let us know what you thought of the event, and if you're interested in learning more about these topics. And please be sure to hand the card to one of the volunteers that are around the room on your way out. Finally, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please submit them through the Slido that we will have provided on the slideshow. And as well, you can also raise your hand during the presentation, and we'll be glad to answer them. Now, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker. And this evening we have the privilege of hearing from Father Luc Poirier, who will be addressing the question, is Christianity outdated? Father Luc Poirier is a Roman Catholic priest who is a member of the priesthood fraternity of St. Peter, a society of apostolic life established by St. John Paul II in 1988. Dedicated to the traditional Latin Mass and the ancient liturgical and disciplinary traditions of the Catholic Church. He was ordained in 2019 after 7 years of formation at Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary in Denton, Nebraska, and has been stationed at St. Ignace Church in Montreal as the assistant priest since his ordination. He was born and raised in a small rural town just outside Montreal, New Brunswick, in a large Catholic family. His priestly vocation was solidified when he discovered the traditional Latin Mass when he was 20 years of age, and has always and continues to be his raison d'etre. His love for the traditional Latin Mass and all that flows from it was always anchored in his love and fidelity to the Roman Catholic Church. He continues his priestly ministry here in Montreal and tries to serve as faithfully as he can to all those who are seeking to integrate God in their lives. Please join me in welcoming Father Luc Poirier.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the organizers at Relevant McGill, Maria, who got contact with me right there. Thank you so much. Anybody else that I may have forgotten? Well, thank you so much. And obviously this conference is Christianity outdated. It's a disclaimer, obviously, this is an obvious thing, but there will be a flavor of Catholicism. So as we go there, however, it's not just going to be a Catholic conference, but I want to establish some principles and answer this question that is so relevant today, because we do have issues in this. And it seems like, why are we even asking this question? Why is it relevant today, and how can we address it? And I think also, how personally can we answer those questions that affect us personally, existentially? I want to begin by speaking about Aristotle in his book of Politics, the pagan philosopher, obviously, that lived 4 centuries before Christ. And in his book of Politics asks, what is the happiness of man? And you might ask yourself, well, why is that relevant? Why are we talking about this? Well, we have to understand that this is not an aspect of faith here. As faith in it exists, Christ wasn't even born. The church was not founded. And he goes down the list and asks and answers the questions. First off, can pleasure be the end or the happiness of man? And he answers no. Why? Because even pigs have pleasure. It's below our rational human nature. There's something more to us. Second, what about money? What about that? Can money make man's happiness? The answer is no. Why is that? Because money is to buy other things. It's not an end in itself. And Thirdly, he says, what about honors? To be honored by the people. He says no, because that is contingent upon the opinions of men. And they change. And then I would add a fourth one. Seems to be more prevalent today, is the health of the body. Seems to be an idolatry of the body. That's the most important thing. Why is that? Well, why can that cannot be man's happiness? Well, because we all die. And Aristotle, we have to understand and keep ourselves in that perspective that he does not have any contact with Christianity. It doesn't exist. He says the happiness of man, the end of man, is the contemplation of the first cause, which is absolutely mind-blowing when you think of this. That he already understood that the wise man contemplates a thing that is greater than himself. He understood that he could not be the cause of his own existence. And these ephemeral things of the world could not make man happy. And why is that important? Well, it's not just for Aristotle. It's for all, because we all share a common human nature. If it's a common human nature, we must share the same common goals. Now, this lays the groundwork to understand that also, why would we even ask the question, is Christianity so relevant today? Is it outdated or is it eternal? Well, first off, it's important to understand that faith and reason go together. This idea of this constant fight, we'll see, flows from atheism, flows from materialism, flows from a separation of what is spiritual. To reduce knowledge to only those things that are empirical, quantifiable, if you want. But how do we get to this? Well, first off, we must understand in Christendom that the sciences were hierarchical in order. The first was theology, the study of God. Then we had philosophy, the handmaiden of theology, there to serve theology. And then you have the natural sciences, all well ordered. Now comes around the age of enlightenment, the dear René Descartes, the father of modernity, this cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, which traps the man in his mind. And this age of enlightenment reduces or even deifies reason. Reason and philosophy is the queen of all sciences. Theology is put in the background. Now, as we advance in the 19th and 20th century, we have a shift. Philosophy and reason take the back seat, and natural sciences become the most important thing. What is quantifiable, empirical. And we reduce this knowledge to that. And if you put philosophy and theology in the back seat, obviously the question asks itself, why is it outdated? Are we advancing? Aren't we smarter than this? Are we done being manipulated by the church, by Christian morals? That's what it seems. That's what it seems. However, it seems that because we were told. But can we question? Why are we questioning this? Has man really evolved to the point that not only Christianity, but the very idea of God is antiquated and expired? Do we have all the answers? Us men? Are we constantly evolving? Have we put science as our new religion? And that's something I've wondered as you study or you listen to these modern physicists, it seems like you have these theories of multiverses and string theory, and you wonder, this is not physics. This is metaphysics, the study of being. Right? So we have scientists that cannot thwart the fact that man has an urge, a natural tendency to go to God. Cause and effect. Right? We're not the cause of our own existence. If we were, we would have existed before we existed. That's impossible. So we go beyond that. So even though they might say theology, philosophy is antiquated, now natural sciences, that's the true intelligent man, is the one who is scientifical. The reason is, and the irony behind all this, it becomes the religion. And we can never shy away from those metaphysical questions and existential questions. Why are we here? Right? Have we truly been, as they would claim, been released from the evil and manipulative shackles of Christian morals and values? Even here in Quebec, the White Revolution, this is what they claimed. The complete separation from church and state. That is what will make us free. But the question is that true freedom? Are we truly free and profoundly happier since the great day of embracing a godless society which rejects the very foundation of Western civilization? It seems otherwise. Suicide, especially in young people, is on the rise. 50% of marriages end in divorce. And we know solid families is the foundation. The nucleus family is the foundation of society. Because we know that 80 to 85% of prison inmates, male prison inmates in the United States, were born in fatherless homes. There's a great lack of ability of long-term commitment. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety prescriptions are off the charts. As much for the younger and older generations. Antisocial behaviors are on the climb because, in my opinion, of excessive cell phone usage, where social interaction is between a screen. An immense mental health instability. A loss of sense and direction in life, an emptiness in the meaning of life, what life is, and our existence. The list goes on. Look, I don't want to be gloomy, but in order to fix what I see being a problem, and we'll see why, we need to establish the problem. And if we want to put a veil in front of our eyes and deny it, and it seems like everything is going well, this purposeful ignorance will not help anybody. Because sometimes truth does hurt, but it's like medicine. Sometimes you must make and take difficult decisions, but it is necessary. In this so-called liberation of the shackles of Christian slavery, we have in turn entrapped ourselves in the prison of the isolation of the mind. That is unhealthy because, even coming back to Aristotle, we are political animals. What do I mean by that? What does Aristotle mean by that? That means we are created. We're here to live in society. We're social animals. Isolation is not good. You guys all went through through COVID. It's not good. We know this. Now, and when we're entrapped in the walls of our mind, we're unable to see the rays of the light of transcendent beauty, transcendent truth and goodness. Because we are in the cell of our own mind and design. we become the center of our existence. We think we are self-sufficient. We become the center of the universe. And if we are the center of everything, it will always be selfish and self-seeking, which is always to the detriment of others. Now, but if we reduce our raison d'être, our reason of existing, and our moral compass to a purely subjective standard, is how I think of it. There will be no more standard, because the standard is the individual, not the objective and common goal we are striving for. Objective goodness and truth. If the individual is the moral compass, there is no moral compass. There is no such thing as your truth and my truth. There is truth to which we must all conform. Because if there is no objective truth, what are we striving for? And then we wonder, why do we feel empty and without meaning? Because we have no goals. What goals can we have if we ourselves are lost ourselves and don't even know where we are going? How can we not feel empty and lost? We have, if I can say, relativized truth and human dignity to whether this human being benefits me or society. That's dangerous. It smells of eugenics. Rights are no longer inalienable because all men are created in God's image from the moment of conception to natural death. No. Now, the right to live of humans depends on the choice of young mothers in distress that need rather help, or the families and doctors that see that their aging parents or patients as a burden to them and society. It's pragmatism. It's practical ramifications. Are you useful to me? What do I get out of it? And that is a downfall of society. And as we know, up to recently, it wasn't question. There was order. There was peace. Again, we know that there are men, there are wars and difficulties. I'm not saying it was perfect. However, there's certain truth that will always truth, and in my opinion, will always be truth. We live in an age where it is the tyranny of relativism that reigns unhinged, which seeks to establish chaos and division instead of order and unity as its essential building block. And this is where we see and understand where Western civilization was built on. Western civilization was built on charity, on a true sacrificial love. Might sound like a fairy tale, however, it's not. It's this reality that there is no true love without a choice. And in Christian, Western, because there is no Western civilization without Christian principles and morals, is Christ crucified. That there is no love than this, that man has to give his life for his brother. Right? This is what it's all about. And even when I form couples for marriage, because I can see how important this is for society, I say you should judge your happiness on not what you get out of your spouse. But you should be happy when your spouse is happy. That's the judge. That is the standard of your happiness. And there is always more joy to give than to receive. It fills us with the true sense of our lives. It answers this existential question. That was the standard, to love God with one's whole heart, mind, and strength, and our neighbor as ourselves. It is truly a love that imitates the cross. It is a love that is difficult yet sweet. Will cause pain but will be the source of spiritual joy and intellectual awakening. A Christian paradox, right? We don't just see the cross for the sake of the cross. We see it through the light of the resurrection. We embrace it. We see there's a point to it, a purpose. There's a reason for everything. Even though we might not understand it right now. This is the key to find peace and order in Western society, in our society. It is seeing our individuality in the divine light of the truth of Christ. It's objective truth. For He is the way, the life, and the truth. He not only reminds us to never forget the relationship of creature to creator, obviously, like I said, to love God with soul, mind, strength, heart, but that He also teaches us and gives us the fullness of truth, and even gives us Himself. What a gift this is. It will bring sense to our sufferings, to show us that we are not the center of this world, to give us a reason to exist, and an answer to the mystery and tragedy of death, a safe haven, hope, light. He will be right beside us, and He knows what burdens we carry, and I would even say and dare to say the forgiveness we need. He is our husband that. He gives us strength to carry on. Now peace is then established in our hearts. And peace, as defined by St. Thomas Aquinas, would be a tranquility of order. Right? We're at peace when we know we're doing what we're supposed to do. But if we follow the standards of this world, if I feel good about something, well, that's fine. But why are people still lost? The tranquility of order is found outside of us. We conform to truth. Now, we must see through all of this that morality cannot be a moral construct. Because the issue with that is that we fall into relativism. And relativism leads to nihilism. Because there is no purpose. And that's why Nietzsche lost his mind, because he brought relativism to its natural conclusion: despair. Now, without Christianity, and I can even say, in a special way, Catholic Church, hear me out, we would have no universities. We would have no well-established legal systems. Obviously, what the church did, she took the Roman system, affected it. No schools. No real development in the early stages in science and medicine. And all the charitable works that come the true Christian spirit. Feeding the hungry, to clothe the naked, visit the imprisoned and sick, shelter the homeless, instruct the ignorant, counsel the doubtful, to admonish the sinner, to forgive injuries, comfort the sorrowful, to bear wrongs patiently, pray for the living and the dead. Obviously, I just mentioned the corporal works of mercy and the spiritual works of mercy. Because often, the atheist will say, well, I'm a good person, I do good works, fantastic, good. The church also does, and always has, and always will. But as our Lord tells us, the poor you will always have with you, me only after a while. And that means for us our own lives. The time He grants us on this earth is a time to be close to Him. But we also can be also close to Him through the work we do to those who need that help. But we cannot reduce our whole existence to this. All social justice works. We're missing the point. Now this is Western civilization, or at least what it should be. We have been divided by identity politics. And this, especially by the far left lobbies that want discord and disunity by pushing ideologies instead of a true desire for objective truth and goodness. This is what universities are for, to debate truth. The left seems to be tolerant to the point that we repeat their same opinions. We are meant for something greater than ourselves. And these divisive ideas lead us to a road of confusion and even worse, despair. However, there is always hope. We have hope. There is always a glimmer of hope. There's always light, no matter what. And in my priestly duties, first off, if any of you would have told me 15 years ago you'd be a priest, I would be like, you're crazy. Honestly. God is incredible. But I have seen the most desperate situations and bad situations. But there's always been hope. There's never a situation so horrible that there's no glimmer of hope. We need God. We need something more than ourselves. We need intellectual humility to recognize the necessity of transcendent and objective truth to give us our eyes on that, our goal. It will be a difficult battle, and the war will be fought in our souls, but do not shy away from silent contemplation of God. There's too much noise in this world. Take the time, as Aristotle, to contemplate in silence. And I end by quoting Joseph Pieper, great philosopher, who tells us, the greatest menace to our capacity for contemplation is the incessant fabrication of tawdry, empty stimuli which kill the receptivity of the soul. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you, Father Luc, for the talk. And I have to say, I enjoyed it personally, and especially when you said the tranquility of order as peace. it felt like it tied together the whole idea of an objective truth, and I have to say thank you so much for this. Now we will move on to the next portion, where I imagine lots of you, or some of you, have put in questions to Slido, or you can always raise your hand to ask them yourself. Now, I'll take a moment to look at the questions. And we can just, anybody who has some questions, just raise up your hand. So, yes.
Do you believe that on average, men and women lived better and more fulfilling lives 50 years ago than today?
Yeah. Yeah, I just by the statistics that you see with the mental health issues that we have in society, I think, you know, it seems like we should be the most happy society that's ever lived because we're so spoiled and we seem to be the more lost of sense of where we're going.
Yeah, so like your take is that on average, our lives today are worse than they were 50 years ago.
I think at least, okay, well, like as regards our like psychological, like mental health stuff and just like our goals as a son, yes, I would say. Yeah. Yeah.
What's an actual program for increasing religiosity in society?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a packed question. Well, I think, well, there's a lot of things you can do. I think, first off, I think we have to, generally people, I should be scared about showing who we are and what we stand for. Like I walk around and draw my Catholic. This is what I do. This is who I am. I'm proud to be the kind of guy I am. I think society at large is hard because even when you start talking about society at large, like I said, even here in Quebec, the Quiet Revolution, we have a complete separation of church and state. So to try to push this even in societal or political, it's hard because you already have legal systems set in place to stop this. So I think maybe on the individual basis to try to do your own to do that kind of stuff and not be afraid of who we are. I think that's important. You know, if it wasn't for God and what He's done in my life, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be. You know, it's an incredible thing, and I think we have to live up to that. So essentially, for us, it's to live up to that, be happy, and give a sense of, you know, just a sense of hope to people. Listen to people, talk to people. Be happy to be. Some people are just, just take the time to listen to people. I think that's what I would do. But it's hard on a societal basis to do that, especially with what we have now. But I think there is a slow renewal. I think people are starting to realize. I think the younger generations are seeing that they're not truly happy. I don't think there's a fulfillment. We have everything we should need to be happy, but we're still not happy. So it's a very interesting question. I don't know if I answered it, but maybe just on any real basis, try to live up what we believe. I think it's important. Yeah.
How do we define what the objective truth is?
Oh, this is where it becomes a study on philosophy. So philosophy is important. I think that's the beginning of it. And because the first thing is to understand what do we mean by truth. Okay? Because, see, there's two kind of schools of thought, right? The objective truth, that's what I think. It's I conform to truth, right? And that's why even logic is important, to see how to form an argument, to see how can I logically put my premises in order for it to be logically following. And so that's something we don't have. I think even because what we're just kind of being force-fed a lot of stuff, and they don't want critical thinkers. I think just to be able to think and not just repeat everything we've done. So we've been taught. The importance of objective truth is saying, well, I think it takes also an intellectual humility, being, well, maybe what I've learned, like put into question of what I think to be true. And it can even start as simple as, there's certain things we all can agree, unless we're really pious, but I mean, like, there's certain things that stealing is bad. Okay, but lying is bad. Now, some people, I don't know, something gets kind of crazy out here, so I don't know, maybe people, but start at the basic of but because the thing is, for somebody who doesn't believe in objective truth, what makes that wrong? Well, because you think it's wrong, well, I think it's right. So who's right? So that you can start at the base of, okay, let's establish something upon which we can agree, or at least something that, so I would say start with the natural law, of things like that to like establish, because what's going to happen is that if somebody doesn't, well, he might say it's wrong, but maybe ask him, why do you think it's wrong? Well, because I think it's wrong. Well, that's not sufficient, because you could just counter the argument, well, I think it's right, because if it's dependent upon me. So I think that also of finding certain things, because there is an objective moral standard that, do good to others, the golden rules, do to others what you would want be done to you. There's certain things you could establish. But that then you ask the question, why is it wrong? Well, because I think it's wrong. Well, that's not sufficient enough, because I think it's right. So the thing is that moral inconsistency can kind of spark debates, and that's what I would start with, right? So, question? Yes?
Do you think there are any positive societal benefits that have come with decreased participation in religious institutions?
On to matter of the cloth, I don't. If I say yes, and I'm going by ear. I would say, well, I would say no. But what were you? Do you have anything that you would say anything was positive? Because if you're thinking about the question, you might have something in mind.
People, the whole thing about like speaking up for what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are a lot of people that didn't believe in God in the past, but felt like they had to pretend to in order to get a lot of things out of it.
Okay, fair. But is that objectively better? And that's the whole question. Is that objectively better to do that? It's not the best to just like move on and not have that. But do I think that's wrong per se? No, because even though they might not personally believe it, objectively I would say it's true. So now this lies, and I think there's been, and I see the lack, and I've seen it even in the Catholic churches, of some of the bad formation. So I think for us is to form people, because
wait, can you elaborate on what you mean by bad formation?
Oh, the bad formation, because look, when I grew up, I didn't know when I went to, in Catholic church, you go to catechism, okay? So I didn't learn what I was supposed to believe. It was my parents that really taught me. And then when I was 19, I started studying by myself. So I went to an old catechism and old books, and I started reading St. Thomas Aquinas. I was like, whoa, this makes sense. What I believe, even though I didn't really fully understand, I saw that there was a system, faith, and reason together. When you start digging and studying, it makes sense. So this is what I wasn't taught, but I was self-taught in a certain sense. Obviously, I had my formation as a priest. But the thing is that why I would say, just because, so objectively, what that person, even though is not convinced, what he believes is true. Okay, it's my opinion, is true. Therefore, it's not something bad, even though if subjectively that person doesn't really, is just following the societal norm. So objectively, it's good. However, I think subjectively, we need to do, I think, generally speaking, we need to do a better formation. I think that's been lacking in the 60s and 70s, particularly in the Catholic Church. That's my opinion. So that's what I would say.
Before we
please.
have a question on Slido.
Yeah.
So someone who asked, was there a moment in your life that you felt an aspect of Christianity that you felt outdated? And in parentheses, not necessarily Christianity as a whole.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had some crazy teenage years. I didn't really. It's not that I ever doubted my faith. I just didn't practice. I didn't care about it. What did I say? Yeah, it was just before I turned 19 that I came back seriously to my faith, because I was absolutely miserable. A life of rejection of God as you're taught, and it's not just in my mind. Like I really, truly, God. Even through my studies, you can show a certain that God exists. That is the uncaused first cause. But to be separate from that, there was a time when it wasn't so much a doubt, but practicing that belief that I had. Yeah, 100%. I wasn't always striving to be a good holy priest, for sure. So, yes, I would say not the doctrine, but just the practice of it, because it's, the faith that I have, it's not just a notion of, well, I believe, but it's also the practice of it, which I kind of just pushed to the side for a little bit in my life. So, yes. Yeah.
What are your thoughts or advice on approaching this topic with people who have been hurt by the church?
Okay. Time, patience and understanding. Because I've also have dealt with people that have been hurt by members of the church, and it's a difficult thing. You need, because trauma and those kinds of wounds take a lot of time. So patience and understanding, just listening to people, and for me, it's just doing like my little part in showing that and regaining the trust of saying, I'm not here to hurt you, but here to help you. But it takes a lot of time and patience. And I've helped some people throughout my few years as a priest, and still now it's still constant. There's still work to be done for those people. It's a constant work. It's difficult for them. So also patience and love and care and understanding and listening. Yeah, that's good. Yes?
I have a question. So you definitely don't think that Christianity itself is outdated, but do you ever think there's certain beliefs that maybe are? And like, for example, like not to get political or anything, but like pro-choice, pro-life. We, like you said yourself, the foundation of a good society is like happy, good families. So do you think that if you like believe conception, like life begins at conception, but then do you think it is better for a woman who doesn't want her child to have to raise her child, or like have to bring her child into the world? Because then, say the child doesn't have a parent, has a mom who doesn't even want them, has to be put in foster system, like stuff like that. Do you think that truly benefits society to have like parents?
Yeah, look, I'm pro-life all the way. And it's not just because the church tells me that, it's because I firmly believe it. I see and the church teaches that we protect life from the moment of conception to natural death. And I think it's important, because if the issue is that if you don't draw the line there, where do you draw it? Because if, let's say we take the argument, he's a burden, like, look, granted, let's say 15-year-old, let's say she's raped by her uncle, she's pregnant, it ruins her life. Okay, fair. That's the worst situation, like a very horrible situation. Now, the issue is that if you draw the line of, well, the child will be raised not correctly, or the issue is that, but what about like a 1-year-old child that is really giving me a hard time, and I don't have time for their money, or I can't feed him? Like, is it better to kill the child outside the womb, or send them in the adoption care? See, the issue is that I see life is precious for the moment of conception, because if you don't set that line and draw that line clearly, then you get to things like partial birth abortions, which we don't get into details, but it's very gruesome what happens in those things. And the things, but because that's the idea, because like even in Roman times, like the dad had the right for the child up to 2 years old to kill the child if he wasn't. So because, well, again, it was that kind of same thing, is that if we don't draw the line at conception, where's the line? Because if you move that line, there's no way to logically place it at, let's say, first trimester, like some people say. But why first trimester? And why is it? So that's the thing, is that I don't think it's outdated. I don't think it'll ever be, and I think the church will never change her doctrine of it. It just because the sanctity of life begins at conception, and that line is drawn very clearly. Now, there are many organizations that are to help these children that might be raised in poverty, and I think it is. Is it difficult? Is adoption difficult? Is it? Yes. But I think like even situations like this, because people will use the argument of rape or incest, but why don't we punish the guy who raped? I think, and like I think it should be castrated, in my opinion. Or they should, but even like they should be severely punished. Like, and I think I try to treasure the life, even though it wasn't in the perfect circumstances, and draw the line clearly. Because if we don't, and we're in a slippery slope, and there's no way to draw the line other than that. So that's what I believe personally. I think it's just that care of life from the moment of conception.
But do you?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
I don't see your question, that's why.
But I was like, okay, let's say like, as a Christian, like that is what I believe as well. But then, how do you feel about forcing that on somebody who isn't religious, who doesn't have those beliefs? And then it's like, okay, well, I don't believe that. So
but what is sexuality for? See, I believe it's for procreation also. You can't just separate from pleasure. So if there's consequences to your actions, this idea of sex without consequence is a product of a sexual evolution. I don't believe in that, because that perverts the love. And you know what happens? Women are the victims. That's the issue. See, the issue is that when we have sex without consequence, that, then the women become the victim in this. And that's the issue, because, and so that's the idea. So I think it's not only religious beliefs, I think there's also the understanding and that there are consequences, and I think sexuality, to separate it from the procreational aspect, I think this is an issue that I don't believe in. I think so when you have sex, there's a possibility of procreation. So that's the thing, is even though, oh well, I didn't want it and expect it, well, I think it's kind of it's kind of a weak argument, because well, you knew it could happen, so if that's just what can happen, and you know what's the thing is, I tell those people, you know what's 100% you won't conceive? Well, just live chaste. Like, oh, you're a loser, boo. Like, but I think it's just the thing is, that's where I think it's not just a religious argument here. It's the natural consequences of actions, but because we've taken things for granted, like this. That's a perfect example. That we think sexuality can be devoid of the procreational aspect, and I think just because we have the ability to do that doesn't make it right, because that act has an end. The end we can't just separate from that, and I think that the practical ramification of that is that you women become victims. And men can be pigs. That's unfortunate, and that's the unfortunate part, and that's the thing. And because also for pregnancies, it's not 95% of it is on you. It's on you guys, on you girls. It's hard. The man, could just walk away. Obviously, thanks be to God, there's a legal system that hopefully protect their rights and have that. But yeah, so I think it's not just a religious argument. There's also an understanding of it, of sexuality, and like I said, I think it's a product of the sexual evolution of separating the procreation aspect from life.
Let's just do a couple more questions, because
Yeah.
we're too close. But one of them does come from Slido just now, and it says, how do we get saved according to Catholicism, and can we lose our salvation?
Good question. Grace and justification, sanctification. Good question. Obviously, how you're saved is through the applied infinite merits of Christ, obviously, but there has to be a cooperation. God will not save you without yourself. Okay? So obviously, faith and justification is a free gift. However, there has to be a cooperation to that. Now, it is kind of, how would I say, there is like a gray, not a gray zone, but like a very mysterious zone of where our will actually decides salvation, where grace is given. But yes, salvation is a free gift, and we don't believe once saved, always saved. We believe that we must, as St. Paul says, work out our salvation in fear and trembling, one day at a time. And we must, because we don't know if we're saved, we have to act as if we're saved. Act in the way conform to what the church teaches us through the continuation of the apostolic succession that we have and we do have in the Catholic Church. So it's both our obviously the free grace of God, but there also has to be a cooperation in that. So, in a nutshell.
Just one more question.
Yeah.
You mentioned briefly the separation of church and state.
Yeah.
What do you think would be, in our world, like an ideal situation?
In our world, I don't know, like, I'm a monarchist at heart, but I think I'm also a realist, so I don't think it would work here, but I also don't believe in a complete separation of church and state. I think there is no state without the church. That is, the Christian moral compass comes from the church. Now, how that will apply to here directly now, like you mean in Canada here?
I'm saying
Just in general?
in our
In
society in general. Like, what do you think would be, if you had a magic wand, how would you think it should be set up?
And this is a whole other conference, but I'll have to sit down and like write a conference for 6 hours before I can. But I don't have a question, like an answer, because it's a really huge question and answer that would take a lot of time for me to answer. But I definitely do not believe in the Catholic Church. church and state separation.
Just quickly before we end.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a continuation on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
So personally, I'm from Iran and I experienced the integration of
Yeah.
that was Islamic,
Yeah.
but the integration of the religion and the society, and it's awful. It is it is not a good place to live in, and the structure does not work.
Yeah.
And I see the punishments are severe, and they do public hanging at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And I do not like to live in a society like that, and I do not know what would be the defense for something like this.
Because we
experienced it firsthand.
because Islamic morality is not the same as Christian morality. It's a different, completely different moral
It is a
makeup
very,
and understanding.
It is a very, it's a copy from the Old Testament, as far as I know. In cooperation with the historical stories of the prophet or something.
We could get, we could talk after if you want, but I don't think it's completely accurate. But the idea is that it is different. I think even the idea of Christian morality and Islamic morality is not on the same level. It's not the same kind of. We don't work from the same principles per se. Yes, do I think there is Islamic kind of morality based? I think it's not only a base of the Old Testament, but I think there's also some Christian elements in there mixed together. So I don't think it's the same exact thing, if you want. But yeah, I'm sorry I had a bad. I think extremely Islamist society is not a very good thing. I think there is a difference between that and the church and state. But it's something maybe come see me after we talk more in detail.
We do need to end up now.
Okay.
Well, can we just give a round of applause for? Very insightful, and thanks to everybody here who got to just take something out of this and here to listen. Now, just a couple things. We would encourage all of you to check out the schedule for the remaining talks. And for tomorrow, Thursday, in the same room, we will have Lena Cebula in the evening tomorrow. She will speak on her experience in human trafficking industry and how she found God in the midst of her suffering. And that's in the afternoon. So tomorrow evening, after that, we will have as well Maranatha Weeks, who work as a nurse on the front lines of Muslim Iraq. And hopefully you guys don't have to miss those amazing stories. And then finally, if the evening's discussion got you thinking, it got you wondering about whatever he said, you are more than welcome to ask any questions. He's here available to talk. And since we don't have this room for a limited amount of time, we encourage you to have the talk outside in the hallway. And also, finally, we just encourage you to fill out the feedback form and to give to the volunteers. And we hope to have you go the rest of the night. Thanks so much.